Welcome to Beer Money America, the podcast for all of us people that don't want to talk about politics, but we talk about it anyways, right? So,
Yeah. It's like a bad
uh,
habit.
it is, it is. So, anyways, I got a quick question for you to start off,
Hmm.
because you seem to have you're really into kind of sciencey things. So, I figured
Hmm.
you might know this. There's folks that have dyslexia. I don't think I have dyslexia because I can
I'm
read and everything.
dyslexic.
Are you really? Oh, well, then I'm asking the
I am.
perfect person. Is there such things as vocal dyslexia? Because my brain seems to work pretty good when I'm reading, but when I start to verbalize, it's like, hey, wait, that because and why I even bring it up is with Beer Money America. I keep wanting to say Beer America Money. And it's like, is that a form of dyslexia? Because I do that not only with that, but with other phrases and stuff. And I've never really
I
researched
would
it.
I would say technically it's not dyslexia because dyslexia it tends to be kind of a specific thing. So there's
Okay.
oh God, I think it's the DSM, the Diagnostic Manual for various psychological things. There's a bunch of criteria, and if you meet the criteria, you're considered to have dyslexia. And it doesn't involve anything having to do with speech. At least that's my recollection. I was tested so long ago, I don't even remember what the
Right.
criteria are.
Right.
But obviously, the thing about dyslexia and trying to understand what it really is and kind of what it's like, it's somehow your brain isn't communicating things in the way that most people's brains are.
Right.
So you could apply that same kind of thinking to any kind of difficulty with communication or anything else. I mean, like if the speech center in your brain isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing or what is normally considered normal function with speech, then the connection between the memory portion of your brain and the speech portion of your brain or the intellectual portion of your brain, all these connections have to be working
Right.
at peak values, or you run into hiccups. Oddly, I'm trying to think of the senator from Pennsylvania who had the stroke.
Oh,
um,
Fetterman. Fetterman?
Fetterman.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. First of all, let me say I don't want to talk about anything about his case or anything. I mean, obviously, I
Right.
don't.
Right.
I'm not. I don't have his medical records or anything like that. But what it appeared is that his cognitive ability was intact, but he couldn't. He'd lost the ability to speak, and these are things that have been studied before. There's the speech areas of your brain are called Broca's and Wernicke's, I think. Again, I haven't looked at my brain anatomy in a while.
Right.
But anyway, if you have damage to those areas, but not damage to your cognitive area, I mean, you still think and comprehend just like you always would. But when you attempt to produce speech, you're unable to do it. So, I
Right.
mean, the brain is absolutely fascinating thing, just
It's a mysterious
remarkable. And,
place. Right.
yeah. And I actually saw some pictures of Fetterman more recently, and he appears to have, better speech control and everything. So more power to him. God
Yeah.
bless him. Hope he recovers.
Yeah. I actually saw an interview with him on one of the late night shows. I think it was, who was it? Stephen Colbert.
Hmm.
And he still had his little device that like basically spits out the words that helps him
Yeah.
focus on it. Because in his case, he can understand it, but the way his brain's working at that point, he needs that extra little
Right.
bit of assistance. But he was like remarkably improved compared to when I had seen him, I don't know, 2 months ago or whatever. So he's
Yeah.
definitely made huge improvements, but it's just it's such a fascinating thing. I mean, we know so little really about the brain. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever read the book, or I actually listened to the audiobook of it called The Body. It's written by Bill Bryson, and
Oh,
he writes in a
uh,
very layman's terms, and he talks about all parts of the body, right? And all functions and stuff.
yeah.
And basically, at the end of it, you realize it's just mind-boggling that we survive. as
Oh yeah, it
to
is.
survive
Bill
and
and I was gonna say
everything.
any listeners out there, Bill Bryson is great.
Yeah. I mean, all the things that have to go right for us to function as living beings is just
Oh, it's
mind-boggling.
mind-boggling.
And
Mind-boggling.
the fact that things like that we're always carrying like cancerous cells in our bodies. It's just some of
Mm.
us do a better job at fighting those off than others. And I mean, it's a really fascinating book, and particularly when it comes to talking about the brain stuff. And so today when I was making my walk and I was repeating beer money America, beer money America. 'Cause I just
Yeah.
constantly want to say beer America money, and I was going, I wonder if that's a form of dyslexia because and I'm sure there's some other, you know, term for it or whatever, but
Yeah,
um,
everything has a name.
yeah,
You just have to know what it is.
right. And we all have
No,
something, right?
again, I'm happy to have you do the introductions. I'll just hands off that. That can be yours. You can do
Well,
that.
and I don't want to make big deals about introductions. Anyways, one of the things that drives me crazy is when they have these 30 or 60-second intros and music blaring and all this kind of crazy stuff. It's like, okay, just get on with it. So, anyways,
Yeah.
shorter the better. Anyways, I don't know if you got anything drinking today, but I've got Mother Earth Brew Cali Creaming today. I don't know. Do you were you here when Mother Earth Brew still had their place downtown? Maybe I don't know. You've only been here what a couple.
I don't think I was. I don't remember it.
Yeah, yeah. It's where
So yeah, I don't think I
Barrel and Stave
was.
is now, and actually Barrel and Stave just moved to CoLab, and now it's the downtown poorhouse or Main Street poorhouse. Anyways, uh,
Right.
a lot of history that nobody probably cares about. But anyways, that they were one of the first breweries that came in downtown, and they're still around. So they're still making it here in Vista, and they're still they also have a tap house, I think, in Idaho, if I remember right. So, anyways,
Idaho, jeez.
yeah,
So yeah, so here's my beverage for the day. It is
yay,
ice water.
good for
Yeah,
you.
so I was out this morning working in the yard, trying to build a workshop in my backyard, and just you know sweating bullets in the sun. So PSA for all of our listeners: before you start drinking, rehydrate, and
Right.
then go from there.
Wow. So you're like, how big is this? I mean, is it
The building itself is 15 by 15 square feet.
wow? That's pretty
So
big.
I'm building it with with a couple of garage doors in it. So it'll be like a storage space in a garden shed, and serve a lot of purposes to help get things cleaned up in my backyard, which is currently a mess.
Well, good for you. That's a big job.
Oh yeah, I've been working at it all week, and it still looks like a bunch of sticks.
Well, more power to you that you're taking that on. I thought it'd always be kind of cool to like build your own house, and I've built a few smaller structures, and I realized, oh my gosh, talk
Yeah,
about it's not only a lot of work, just the knowledge of how all things need to go together and all that. It's a pretty complicated thing. I'm in awe of contractors and carpenters and plumbers and
yeah.
all that because it's not an easy
Well,
thing.
I have to say that this is the maximum size. Anything bigger than this,
Ever
I wouldn't have
attempted?
tried to do it myself.
Yeah,
Yeah, too much.
yeah,
But yeah, it's getting done slowly.
yeah. Well, what the heck? So, what's going on in the world that has tweaked your interest?
Well, again, I was thinking about what we talked about last week and how, sometimes, national things are local things and local things are national things. And I ran across a group here in California that's trying to get an election integrity, what they're calling the Election Integrity Initiative passed. Um, And I sort of extrapolated that out to kind of a bigger thing because, again, we often talk about third parties or trying to start a new party.
Right.
And sort of one of the burrs under my saddle that I get kind of worked up about is this, and I'll just pose it as a question: if you were running in an election and you thought the election was tainted somehow, some way, what is the correct way to say, hey, we need to look at what went on in this election? How do we challenge something? Because my problem is like going all the way back to like Bush v. Gore.
Hmm.
You know, there's all these time limits about how soon you have to have everything in. So something happens. Somebody says, okay, I think this wasn't right. It's hinky. And then there's this whole chorus of people saying, no, 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 the votes were counted and we did a recount. We have to get it in. This can't drag on for 6 months or a year or whatever. And every time that something like that happens, whether it's Bush and Gore or it's Clinton or it's Trump or whoever is mad about the outcome of the election, I always come back to the thing where I'm like, well, if you've only got like 6 weeks to get all the challenges and you try and take it to court, but you can't get on the docket and there's delays and people are, well, by the time anybody finds out anything about anything, well, the person's already in office and there's no recourse.
Right.
And it drives me nuts because I always feel like there should be a recourse. I mean, if something was actually wrong within an election, then there should be some way to do something about it. But I don't know. It's just one of those things. So it's like I'm sort of throwing it out there as an open question. Do we need more election integrity laws? How does a new party come into existence if the old parties can just stomp on it with election violations?
Right. No, that's a good point. With this group, is that what they're focused on? Is trying to come up with additional laws and that sort of thing to ensure better safety of our elections? Is that because I'm not familiar?
Yeah, safeguards. I'm kind of looking at it right now. I don't know. This will be an interesting question for the future about, do you name names? But I don't know if we should be doing that or not. But
I don't
anyway,
know.
it's
I
it's
mean,
mostly about like auditing elections, like having an automatic audit of elections. It looks like it's
right.
saying, and things like that. Which personally, I would be interested in because for me, I would always rather have more information than less.
Sure.
And but I
Well,
mean, again, maybe I'm in the vast minority where everybody's just like, you know what, elections are good. There's never enough of anything that goes on to actually change the course of the election. So whatever does go on doesn't matter. But I just don't know. I'm always left with lingering questions.
well, do you have a sense more there have been issues more commonly than we might believe there have been in terms of
Well,
the
that's the thing.
integrity?
I think that there's always probably some instances
Sure.
of things that happen. I mean, it's the way the world works. But one of the things that got me sort of looking into it and thinking about it was when they started doing the electronic voting machines. And this is like, I'm going to get myself into some kind of conspiratorial, purgatory here probably. But the thing is, it's like I know enough about computers and laptops and how they work to say that, a computer does whatever its software tells it to do.
Sure.
So if you have an electronic voting machine, you go in there, it's got software that says when this person pushes this button, print out the vote for the person he voted for. It's very straightforward. But on the other hand, you could also tell it to when this person votes for person A, tabulate it for person B. I mean, you could
Yeah.
write that program very easily.
Yeah.
And so it's like one of the things that we're told is that the software that runs these computers is proprietary and we can't look at it.
Right.
And it's like, I don't have any proof or evidence to say that, there's anything illegal or
Right.
untoward going on with the laptops. I mean, I'm not saying that, hey, I've got evidence to say that something was weird, but it's like, what do you mean? This is software used for public elections, but we can't look at it. We can't have an independent analysis of the software to say, okay, these things do what you're saying they do.
Right.
I mean, to me, that's just odd.
It is odd. And to think that we have processes in place for other types of security, military security, where
Yeah.
if you have people that have clearances, security clearances, to be able to look at that stuff, right? because you need to
Hmm.
have oversight on that, right? And I've never really thought
Right.
about it, to be honest with you, until you brought it up. That would make total sense to have some kind of oversight of how these things work. I know a lot of states are remain having to do both, right? You can fill out the
Yeah.
written ballot, and then it runs through a machine, so you have a way to go back and do that. But I don't know. The thing that has always been interesting to me when there's been questions about election integrity is usually in the same elections. There's a. It's not like it's a wholesale change. It's not like, okay, well, candidate A who thinks there was a fraud is in the same party where 10 other of the same party won in that same election. So it's like, well,
Yeah.
if they were going to do it, I mean, it's like, why wouldn't you like try and, clean the slate? But maybe they're much
Right.
smarter than that, and they're figuring, hey, no, we want to go after this one strategic position, and so they do their funny coding and do it. But to your point,
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, that is kind of, I never really thought about it until you talked about it. It's like there should be some kind of oversight of how this is put together when we're relying on these private companies. I mean, the people that build our military aircraft, they have all kinds of oversight on
Oh, yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And so, of all things, the election should fall in that camp. I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, it's like in sort of, I mean, obviously the reason I read it is because this group is trying to get this passed in California. It's called the Voter Integrity Act, and they're
Mhm.
trying to get it on the ballots. And so again, from the third party type perspective or a new party perspective, it's like, you have, if you're ever going to have a chance, you're going to have fair elections. But it's like there just seems to be in recent years so many people making claims, which, I think largely don't really have a lot of credibility and have been dismissed. But it's like it just seems to me that almost every election somebody says, "Oh, I something got stolen." Because I mean,
Right.
it's like I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but there's Kerry Lake in Arizona who's still suing
Right.
people. Trump has obviously been indicted for, election
Right.
interference, and one of the things he did was he actually took some of the voting machines. I guess they're saying. I
Right.
don't know 100% about. I mean, those are allegations right now.
Right.
There was the lady from Georgia who I think still says the election was stolen from her.
Right. Oh no,
Um,
yeah, there's several. I mean, Carrie Lake's probably the most
Clinton,
famous, and she's lost
yeah.
every court case, but um, you
Well,
know,
I actually think that there is. I think she's still in court with one of them. I'm not
one of them I
sure.
know, but I just
Honestly, I'm
saw
not
that.
sure the facts.
Yeah, I don't follow it anymore. I know just in the last week or so there was some other one she lost. But
Yeah,
but you would think that it would make sense for everybody involved that there was, to your point, a process and oversight of these things to preempt it,
yeah,
so people are not concerned and raising. I mean, they'll always be concerned to some level, right?
yeah,
Um, but to put more of a process in place, because it would not be out of the realm of imagination that somebody could muck with something these days with the way technology is.
yeah.
We know that can happen, right? So it's really a good point. But what I think this actually brings up another point for me on the third party piece is, and you and I, we were talking a little bit about this when we were out at Miracosta and trying to Miracosta College. We've been to Miracosta
Yeah.
College and Palomar and a few of the community colleges around town, just trying to interest younger people in, not even third parties, just get them interested in the whole political process. And I think you probably noticed this too. Whenever we were talking to some of those students, there was I sensed a pretty lack of trust in the government among most of them.
Yeah.
It was it was pretty apparent. I mean, some of them were like, well, I'm kind of for this, for that, but I sensed a lot of, I don't really. that's why they weren't really involved. They just, I just don't really trust the whole thing. I don't think my vote really matters, all those kinds of things. And this is probably one of those things. I hear enough of this kind of stuff potentially going on, whether, perception's reality, right? So it's like, even
Yeah,
if
correct.
nothing is going on, if the perception is something's going on, then that's the reality we're dealing with. And, uh, and that's
Exactly.
where I think, because one of the other topics we discussed at that time was for third parties. They and you and I, we were there on behalf of for our full disclosure for the Commonsense Party, just representing them, trying to get people to sign up and things like that. But it, I see the same thing with a lot of the third parties, like no labels and all that. They're all trying to come up with sort of very kind of vague, okay, here's our goals and our values and all that, which is
Yeah.
all wonderful. But what's missing are specific messages about what do we truly stand for. And this
Yeah.
might be one of them, because I think the whole election integrity, again, whether you agree or disagree whether it's going on, the reality is there's perception, there's something that could be a foul. That
Right.
that could be a good thing for third parties. One of the main messages that I think people could get behind and think about, that's very specific. It goes to a direct topic that people, that's why they're out of the process. That's why they're out of the whole voting thing, because they think it's a sham, right? And,
Yeah.
that might be one entry. I think there's a couple others that third parties need to really kind of focus on and really hone that message. Because right now, it's like with a lot of them, and I'm not, and it's not. I'm not trying to be dismissive of the Common Sense Party or no labels, or
Yeah.
they're all trying to find their way. They're all new. They're trying to figure out where the traction is. But you really nailed it when we were talking about it the other day, that, man, if they don't come out with, a couple really strong points on these are our policy positions. And I know that's hard to do when you're trying to build this big tent of people coming from all different
Yeah.
persuasions and all that. It's not an easy thing. Um, it's going to be very difficult for them to really get people on board. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I mean, you're the
Well,
one
I
that,
was just going to say that, as far as the third party things go, I mean, and I agree with what you said, completely. But I think it all falls under the rubric of transparency. One of the things that third parties should be all about is shining a light on everything that goes on that the other parties are doing. So when it comes to elections, there should be absolute transparency. And I actually am an advocate for the idea that even just as a citizen, like they have the Freedom of Information Act stuff for
right,
federal things. It's like if I want to know exactly what the voter rolls look like, or exactly what the signature verification processes that were in place, or anything, it's a public election. That should be part of the public record. Now, it's understandable that it might take a while for it to get to you, or they have to collect it up and somehow do it. But as a voter and as a citizen of California and of the United States, if I say, hey, hey, I want this information, I want to see, what actually went down with the election, I should just get it. It's a public election.
right.
And so, you see these people, first of all, they complain that the election was rigged or unfair in some way or another. And then it's 3, 4 years of legal battles to get the information
Right.
about, how things were done. That shouldn't be that way. It should be right there for everybody to look at.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, it is there. I mean, but to your point, it takes so long
Yeah.
and have to go through all the court proceedings and all that kind of stuff. If they kind of turned it upside down, and rather than waiting for that, they automatically, like you said, automatic audit. We're going to
Yeah.
divulge all these things. You're not going to divulge people's individual vote. That's a
Yeah.
private.
There's no reason to do that.
No,
Right.
but there's definitely other pieces to that they could, where they're aggregating information, um,
Yeah.
and then it just relieves that pressure of any concerns people have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
makes
And as I say, I mean, it would be better. It would encourage more people to come to the polls. It's an absolute stance that a third party, a new party that actually has a good idea about what it wants to be, could come out and push for it. Because I mean, most people in this country have got to be for transparency,
right.
right? I
Of
mean,
course.
where does the money for campaigns come from? Who are you taking money from? Who are you giving money to? What happens with all the votes? Like, there was one thing that, I can think of fairly recently. It was the attempt to recall um, Newsom.
Hmm.
So one of the things that happened in that was uh, when they submitted the signatures to get the recall on the ballot, um, the government came back and said something like 30% of the signatures were invalid. But then if you look at other elections, it's always like 1 or 2% of signatures they come back
Right.
as invalid. So it's like it's just this inconsistency with, like, how did you determine that so many of these signatures were invalid? I mean, there are millions of people in the state of California who voted for Trump, who I'm sure would be very happy to recall Gavin Newsom. So it's not
Right.
like the signatures, the people in California don't exist that would be willing to sign something, but you throw them all away. And like what like with California, the Commonsense Party of California, that we first met each other, trying to do things
Right.
for them to get to become a party, they have to get enough people registered so that they can become an actual party in California. But if the Secretary of State of California takes a look at that and says, "Oops, sorry, we
Right.
said you needed 100,000, but 90,000 of your votes were just throwing them in the garbage." Well, I mean, it just makes it impossible for them to ever become,
Right.
a valid party in the state of California. So
Yeah.
I think there should be absolute transparency in, how these things are done.
Yeah. And I really, after we talked the other day on the whole messaging thing, you know, the challenge I think too is with some of these political things, whether it's talking about election integrity or my big beef is with campaign finance reform.
Yeah,
Other things are like election reform, other election reform things where it's, hey, should it be ranked choice voting, all that kind of stuff. The vast majority of people, whenever, at least whenever I've brought up any of those issues, their eyes kind of glaze over. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, no, I agree. We need to change our political system, blah, blah. But it's just like, it, but so, but I think enough people are concerned about just the overall integrity of elections that could be
yeah,
one thing where people could get on board with that. It's a simple yes or no. Don't you want more transparency, right? Um, the other
right.
area that, and then the other thing, at least even within California, and there's been some discussion about this, is what's important in one area obviously isn't necessarily important in another area. So, like in Southern California, I think another issue that the third party could really come out very strong about and come up with some very specific policy things is around homelessness because
Yeah,
it impacts everybody throughout at least Southern California and obviously San Francisco and places like that. That you you can't get away from it. People will talk because they see it every day. It's a human tragedy in so many ways, but it's probably homelessness is probably not the biggest issue in the Central Valley, right? It's like if you're out in the middle, if you're in Fresno or whatever, you're more worried about are they going to cut back my water for my farm, right? It's
yeah,
those kinds of issues, right? But so there's probably a couple of those out there that I think it's going to be really important for a third party um, to get at least three or four of those where, hey, this is where we stand on this. We're not going to solve abortion. We're not going to solve probably gun control. We're not, these big, big things that have implications everywhere. But in California, there are some very specific ones. I mean, obviously, homelessness happens everywhere, but it's a really big
right.
deal here. And to the extent that that messaging can be a lot more clear and precise. And I think some logical solutions um, are out there. But back to your comment last week about innovation is the key. There's
Yeah.
a lot of innovation. We just have lacked the ability to implement on some of those things. I mean, we've spent
Yep.
billions on homelessness and it's gone up. And that's where the that's where I think it's such an opportunity for a third party to come in and say, here, this is where we stand on this. It's not a right enough thing. It's a combination of some things that could really work. And that's what's going to really, I think, attract people. Then talking about kind
Yeah.
of
Well,
long,
I think that
we need a third party.
yeah, because I think that one of the ways, again, just talking philosophy of, what you need to do to make the a third party a viable thing. You need to separate yourself from the two major parties, right? So I think separating yourself from the
Yep.
Republicans is just very simple because you're pro-choice and most
Right.
people are anyway,
Right.
with some limitations, and then you just dismiss the Republicans immediately because that's
Right.
they're so hardcore on that one issue. But I think the way that you sort of differentiate yourself from the Democrats is you have to take a new and different approach towards, a lot of social issues and a lot of economic issues. I mean, the truth of the matter is, homelessness is an economic issue. The,
Absolutely.
the Democrats' solution to it is to pump tons and tons of money to various special interest groups with the idea that they're going to do something that's going to make homelessness go away. But I would say that a third party could take a bigger approach, a more overarching approach, and say, look, if we can create a situation where we have reduced cost of living, economic expansion, then some of the homelessness problem can take care of itself in a way because you're creating a system where there is opportunity. And a lot of people, I mean, people end up homeless for lots of different reasons,
Right.
and so you're going to have to, it'd have to be a very multifaceted approach.
Absolutely.
But people who find themselves, you know, out of a job in an economy that's, not the economy that they're used to working in, if you could improve the economy and there was more opportunity there for them, maybe they wouldn't be homeless anymore. So I think you have to start exploring sort of like overarching ideas. What is the philosophy of a party that's going to be different than what we have? And as I say, I think, instead of having a high regulation, high tax, high cost of living, pre-programmed economy that the Democrat, party kind of pushes, go to the opposite of that. We need the way you solve things sometimes is to just be able to get out of the way and let opportunity and innovation, help solve the problem. Instead of trying to have a bunch of masterminds in Sacramento design a
Right.
program that's supposed to work everywhere, which is basically impossible.
Right.
Spread it out all over the state. Let different areas in the state try and come up with solutions in their areas that are good for them. Because again, the homelessness issues in a rural area are probably not going to be the same as the homelessness issues in an urban area. So,
No,
I
not
mean, one size fits all homelessness solution probably isn't going to work. It's
right.
different factors that have to be taken into account if you want to get something that works. So you have to have the freedom and the ability to make those decisions, and do it. And that goes back to local politics again.
Yep.
Expand the ability of local politicians to do things that are good for their communities
Yep.
and make
Well,
it something better.
a really interesting example of that is right here again. I don't know if you saw this a week or two ago, but Vista and Encinitas are actually joining forces, and they bought a couple apartment buildings, and
Hmm.
and they're going to turn them into, and it's for transformation. People can't go in there and live there forever. These are temporary housing, but each person that's homeless, assuming they qualify, um, gets their own place. Because one of the issues, because I've been around kind of this stuff, one of the things that's a challenge is with a lot of homeless, they don't want to go into a shelter because they don't want to go into a building
Yeah.
with 100 other people. There's no privacy. And I kind of get it, right? I mean, so,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
but what's interesting about what Vista and Encinitas is doing is they're getting this stuff ready in literally a couple months instead of so many of these things that go on for years trying to set up this big, huge, complex thing that you're talking about,
Yeah.
and it costing a gazillion dollars, and they're doing it really fast, and just to get people off the street. And there's actually,
Yeah.
and I'll put it in the show notes. There's a pretty interesting podcast that the mayor just did not too long ago, where he's really, full disclosure, I voted against him. So, uh, John Franklin, I voted against him. But uh, since the election, I've really come to appreciate a lot of what he's been trying to do, and one is on the homeless thing. And anyways, in the podcast, he explains this whole strategy that they're coming up with. So people that are interested in that topic, um, he goes on for 20, 25 minutes about how, to your point, it's time to do something different and take some chances. And he's the
Yeah.
first time I've ever heard a politician say, listen, we have to be afraid to fail. We got to try some things. They may not work, but what we're doing
Yeah.
now is not working. Right. And that's what
Right.
innovation is
And
all
that's the
about,
thing,
right? That's what innovation's
right,
about.
if you're constantly, I was just gonna say, if you're constantly doubling down on the solutions that don't work, well, I mean, they're just never going to work. And again, it goes back to the third party idea. It's like, if we keep voting
Exactly.
for Republicans and Democrats, we'll keep getting the nonsense that they like and doesn't work. So you have to have something new. You have to have new ideas. You have to be willing to try new things. And again, I would be interested to see that, you know, podcast
Oh yeah, I'll
from the
put it in the
mayor.
show
So I mean,
notes.
yeah, I'll look at it too. Because,
Oh yeah,
again, there's a lot of, I've talked to a lot of people about, the homeless issue and mental health stuff. And, it's like there's the housing first ideology, and then
right,
there's the, treatment first ideology, and there's all
right.
kinds of different ways to approach things. And I'm not sure that there is a one size fits
There
all for
isn't.
every area.
Hmm.
Right. So it's like you just got to try some things and figure out, what is driving the homelessness in your particular area, and then, what do you do to alleviate it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely listen to it because he's become quite the student about this, and he goes through a lot of what you just talked about and explains it. It's really very fascinating to me because, but the part that really fascinated me was back to what you were talking about last week on the innovation part. That's what he's, and again, you can do that at the local level so much easier. It's like,
Yeah.
let's give this a try. And, if it doesn't work, we're going to tweak it and we're going to try, but what we're doing now isn't working. So,
Right.
it doesn't make any sense to be putting more money into things that we know are not going to work. Right. And so that
Right.
was, I mean, that's kind of a breath of fresh air in my mind. And again, a great opportunity for third parties to really embrace that concept of let's get this innovation wheel moving and at the local level. And that's
Yeah.
why I still remain optimistic about the Common Sense Party and those kinds of efforts as they try to kind of gain their balance. Because I think they are seriously looking at how can we really engage with the local community because that's where that's where the real action can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you
So,
have to engage. But again, you have to engage with new ideas,
right,
because if you just come along and say, we're going to do the same thing the other parties have been doing, it's like we're going
right,
to throw a lot of money. You elect us, and we'll throw a lot of money at the problem. Well,
right,
if that's your position, then why don't I just vote for the Democrat? They've got all the money anyway, so why would I vote for a third party? So you
right.
have to be out there saying something different. So something that can be like, okay, their solution isn't working, our solution has a chance.
Right.
Which
Yeah,
also
there's
is,
only
I
one way to
think,
find out. Yeah, there's only
yeah,
one way to find out.
uh,
It was like
and
I
that's really
saw.
where the
Go ahead. Sorry. Go
well, I
ahead.
was to say that's really where the Republican Party, falls down. I mean, they have no ideas about anything, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, they've
That's
they've
why there's no
totally run
Republicans
out
in
of
California
ideas.
anymore.
It really has become
Yeah,
this, party of no. We just don't want to do anything, and it's sad because I think if you're going to live in a two-party society, which doesn't really exist anymore, um,
yeah,
you need two strong parties that have different views.
right.
And right now, It's really really bad. I loved your term of the uni party because that's really truly
Yeah.
and because that's truly what Democrats and Republicans have become, and it's really kind of
Yeah.
simple to differentiate from them from a third party situation, right? So they're kind of making it easy. It's just
Yeah.
trying to get the independents organized. I was reading, I Googled just out of fascination if there were any states where there are more independents than that was the largest group. There are actually 9
Mhm.
states that have more independents than Republicans or Democrats. And I was
Yeah.
surprised by some of them. There's Alaska, that didn't surprise me. But then there's places
Yeah.
like, I think it's Connecticut, New Hampshire, Maine didn't really surprise me. Colorado has more independents than Republican or Democrats. And even in California, I think independents represent the second largest group of voters out there, more than Republicans.
Oh yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
um, so they're out there. Now it's just if you can just get them organized, and by organized, I don't mean necessarily even in a formal party. I mean, if they all will just kind of come together and start brainstorm, and that's another thing I thought a third party could help facilitate these discussions to get this innovation thing going,
Yeah.
and they could do it with credibility. Where I don't think and I've been to some, and I'm sure you have too, a Republican or a town hall meeting, and it's just okay. We're hitting on all the talking points, right?
Yeah.
And
You
it's
get nothing but talking
not trying
points.
to figure out what makes sense.
Well, that was, again, going back to, I mean, what interests me about third parties is, sort of like, can you create a philosophy to appeal to a broad enough number of people to, be viable? And a part of doing that, I think, is actually identifying what an independent person really is. Because, some people might just identify as, independent because they're anarchists, right? They just don't
Right,
like anything, so they just
right,
say they're independent. But you're probably not going to be able to organize the anarchists because anarchy is the antithesis of organization. So I mean,
right.
that's not really the group you should be reaching out for.
Yeah,
So this is a much longer conversation than I think we have for today. But
right.
one of the things that I think is super important for any third party, if it actually wants to succeed, is it has to identify what is the largest group of disaffected individuals. What do those people look like? Who's out there that does not have representation? And again, maybe as this podcast of ours goes on, I'll give my ideas about what I think that group actually looks like. But I mean, I think it's complicated, but I think there is a definable group of people out there that, is crying out for representation.
Oh, and it changes from state to state, city to city, and all that
Oh,
to
yeah.
some degree, for sure, right? And but the
Yeah.
beauty, I mean, not the beauty, it's the downside and the upside for third parties. California, I mean, it does come down to cost of living and the housing and
Oh,
all
yeah.
that. I mean, if you can make some, realistic plans and policy goals for that area, that goes a long way to solving a lot of other problems, right?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. Yeah.
that really came home to me when I was reading this article yesterday or whatever about the billionaire up in San Jose who's he's got like 2 acres of land near San Jose somewhere, and he's allowing the city to lease it for $1 a year, and then they're going to put in these basically tiny homes for homeless, right?
Yeah.
And so, which is a great thing. I mean, billionaire, it's all pocket change to him, right? But at the same time,
Yeah.
but then at the bottom it said, so the city's going to get involved and they're going to build, it's I think 75 tiny homes, $18 million. And so when I did the math, it's like $275,000 per place, right?
Yep.
And that's,
Exactly.
I mean, for San Francisco, hey, you can't rent a garage for that, right? I get the economics, but that's how out of whack it is. And so then I'm going, well,
Right. And that's
the city would be money ahead if they just offer to anybody who's willing to move to wherever, Louisiana, we'll give you $100,000. Move. We'll save $150,000 and
yep.
we'll be good. I mean,
Exactly.
that's how out of whack it is.
But as I say again, there's just not enough discussion about cost of living. I mean, if you can get cost of living down, then all of a sudden, it's like you want to build a project, you want to do something that you think is productive, but it is so out of whack with the cost of that you can't do it.
Right.
And so if you could get the cost of things down, if you could get cost of living to come down, suddenly the availability of things that you wanted to try or do would be magnified, 1,000-fold because you could try things. Right now it's so expensive to do anything that even trying something is a
Yeah.
terrifying idea. And so you don't get innovation, you get stagnation, and stagnation is death. You cannot have
Absolutely.
that. So I mean, again, that's where the third party push should be, I think. You have to
Absolutely.
do things to have an innovative economy, whatever steps are necessary to take to have the most innovative economy possible. That's what you should be doing.
Well, and those ideas I'm sure are out there. I go back to your old buddy, Ross Perot. Um, I remember him
Yeah.
saying, I remember him saying something to the effect of, you know, if he had been elected, said, "Listen, there's a lot of great ideas and plans already there. We just need to
Yeah,
round them
I think
up.
there are.
We need to just round them up and do it. It's not like I'm going to come up with anything that hasn't already been discussed or figured out, but we have to go out and do these things, not just plan about them or talk about them." And that's the one,
Right.
it's the one take besides his graphs and charts. That's the one thing I remember the takeaway from him is like, hey, I'm not going to come up and say I got this brilliant idea. Those brilliant ideas exist. We just need to round them up
Yeah.
and let's get them done.
Well, the thing is like, when you have a one party system, which is what we have in California, it
In every state.
behooves that one party to keep everything the way that it is because obviously it's put them in power. Why would they change what's putting them in power?
Yeah.
So you have to bring something new in, a new variable to get things to change. And again, that's where third party politics makes a difference. You have to interject something new. Otherwise, you just get status quo forever because status quo works for the
Yep.
people in power and they
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. No, they get real comfortable with it real quick. Because the incentives are there to keep it that way. Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, and another one that came home to me this week is I can't remember where I heard it. It might have been on this podcast with John Franklin that in North County here, to afford rent, a family of four has to be bringing in a little over $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's, that is insane. I mean, I'm not saying that a lot of people, I hope lots of people make over $100,000, but the reality is that they don't, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
how can anybody even afford to live here? And you need those support people. You need people from all walks of life to make a community work. And
Yeah.
it's just like $100,000. I think it's like $110,000 is what the number is. And it's like, that's just
But again, this is where cost of living versus income is a very
right.
important discussion because with the regressive tax code that we have, if you try and earn your way out of, your cost of living problems, you constantly get taxed at a higher and higher rate. So the more you earn, the more you lose. So unless you have an astronomical increase in income, then you can't keep up with these small increases in cost of living. But if you bring down cost of living, then your income can be sustainable because you don't have to worry about always being in the next higher tax bracket. And that's the thing. So it's like people always talk about income and people need to earn more and they need to earn more. But you get killed by the tax code that taxes you more and more the more that you earn. So what you really need to do is you need to bring down cost of living because then, the wages that people earn would actually be sufficient for them to have the lifestyle that they're seeking to have. So it's cost of living is a devastating problem that is not talked about enough.
No, 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 it is. You're right. Absolutely. And we, like I said, we probably should be wrapping this up already. We
Oh
have
yeah,
trouble.
for sure.
We have trouble keeping this to 30 minutes. That was the goal.
Yeah,
And we've yet to even come close to that goal. But that's definitely a topic we should address as far as the cost of living versus the tax system, because I think we could have some very interesting discussions around that, because there's
yeah, yeah,
lots of different ways to skin both those cats. And so
yeah, for sure.
let's definitely put that on the notes to have that discussion. But anyways, I think we probably should wrap it up for now. But I'm just trying to survive the heat. I'm getting tired of this extended summer, so I don't know how it is out your way, but it's getting warm. Here it is. What
I
is
have
it?
to admit,
October 19th, and it's like in the 80s. It's like, come on. And I'm a summertime person, but I'm kind of looking forward to winter this year.
yeah. Well, no, I'm exactly the opposite. With me working in the backyard, I've got some back issues, and if it's cold and clammy, oh, I'm so stiff I
Yeah,
can hardly get moving. But when
yeah.
the weather's hot, you feel good, you break a sweat, you get a little loose, and then you can hammer in all your rafters.
Well, I don't want to keep you from that, so we'll wrap it up. And
No, please do. Please do.